All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a book with a title that I'll admit made me do a double take.
I know what you mean. It's a bold one.
Unconditional Love, and that's it. Unconditional Love. In the workplace, Monica Martinez, the author, is making a pretty big claim here.
Yeah, she's definitely not shying away from a challenge. I mean, most of us struggle to show unconditional love to our families, let alone our coworkers, right?
Right. But the thing is, she's not just throwing out a feel-good phrase. I mean, I've flipped through the book, and there's a ton of research cited in there, all these studies from psychology to neuroscience and even economics. She's really trying to build a case for this.
It seems like she's approaching it less from a purely emotional standpoint and more as a conscious choice we can make to lead differently, like a framework for a different kind of leadership.
Okay, so less about feeling warm and fuzzy and more about making a deliberate decision to change how we operate in a work setting.
Exactly, and I think that's what makes it so intriguing. We're not talking about bringing in a basket of kittens to the office or anything. It's a deeper, more nuanced approach to how we interact with each other and build a better work environment.
Interesting. But before we get too far ahead, let's back up for a second. How is she even defining unconditional love in a workplace setting? Because it's not exactly the most common phrase you hear in a boardroom, you know?
Well, she actually spends a good chunk of the book unpacking that very question. But in a nutshell, she talks about it as seeing the inherent potential in everyone, choosing to believe in their worth even when, they make a mistake or maybe don't live up to expectations. It's about offering that unwavering support and belief in their ability to grow.
That's a pretty radical departure from the traditional employees resource mentality, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's almost like she's saying we need to treat our colleagues the way we'd want to be treated on our worst day. But realistically, can something that idealistic really work in today's cutthroat business world?
Yeah.
I mean, profits are profits, right?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that Martinez tackles head on. She argues that, yes, while the business world can be ruthlessly competitive, there's a growing body of evidence suggesting that this love-in-action approach actually leads to better outcomes, both for individuals and for organizations as a whole.
Oh, really? Like what kind of evidence?
Well, for example, she cites a bunch of studies from Harvard that show how simple acts of kindness, like helping a colleague out or offering words of encouragement, can trigger the release of oxytocin in the brain.
Oxytocin, that's the...
The cuddle hormone.
Yeah.
It's associated with trust, bonding, and social connection.
Oh, right. So there's a biological reason to be a good person in the workplace. I like that. Sign me up.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just feeling good. These studies show that increased oxytocin leads to better teamwork, increased productivity, and even reduced stress levels. So it's not just about being nice. It's actually good for business.
Okay, so there's a scientific basis for ditching the office politics and genuinely trying to be kind and supportive. I'm starting to see the appeal here. But before we jump into being kind to others, Martinez seems to really emphasize the importance of self-love as a starting point. And it's not just the bubble baths and face masks kind of self-love, is it?
No, definitely not. She actually goes much deeper than that. She argues that self-love is a foundational practice for becoming an effective leader. It's about tackling those internal barriers we all face, things like self-criticism, comparing ourselves to others, constantly feeling like we're not good enough.
Oh, tell me about it. I think a lot of our listeners can relate to that feeling of never quite measuring up.
Absolutely. And Martinez points out that when we're constantly battling those inner demons, it's hard to show up authentically and confidently as a leader.
That makes a lot of sense. So how does she suggest we tackle those inner barriers and actually start to love ourselves? Because that can feel pretty daunting for some people.
She offers a range of practical exercises in the book. Things like mirror affirmations, practicing gratitude, setting boundaries to protect our energy. But what really struck me was her emphasis on becoming aware of and challenging that inner critic we all have. That voice that's constantly telling us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not whatever enough.
Oh, I know that voice all too well. It's like a constant companion sometimes.
Right. But Martinez argues that we don't have to let that voice run the show. We can learn to recognize it, challenge its negativity, and replace those thoughts with more compassionate and empowering ones.
It's like retraining our brains to be kinder to ourselves.
Exactly. And when we can do that, when we can learn to love and accept ourselves, flaws and all, it makes it so much easier to then lead others with that same compassion and understanding.
Okay, I'm starting to see how it all connects. So if self-love is the foundation, how do we then use this unconditional love approach to build strong, unified teams? Because, let's face it, most workplaces are a mixed bag of personalities, ambitions, and, occasional drama. How do we create that sense of unity amidst all that?
Well, Martinez talks about the idea of unity, not uniformity. It's not about everyone being the same, thinking the same, or always agreeing with each other. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, our common ground, while also respecting and valuing our differences.
Okay, I like that. Unity, not uniformity. Catchy. But how do we actually put that into practice? Because it can't just be kumbaya all the time, right? There are deadlines, disagreements, and sometimes, let's be honest, you just don't vibe with certain colleagues.
You're right, it's not always easy. But Martinez outlines 3 key pillars for building this kind of unity: active listening, recognizing common dignity, and peaceful conflict resolution.
All right, let's break those down a bit. Active listening, I get that in theory, but how is that an act of love, especially when your coworker is explaining their incredibly detailed fantasy football draft strategy for the 10th time?
Well, think about it. When someone truly listens to you without interrupting, without judging, how does it make you feel?
Seen, heard. Like, my opinion actually matters, even if it's about fantasy football.
Exactly. And those feelings are at the heart of building trust and connection. So even if you're not personally interested in the topic, making that effort to really listen shows respect, strengthens your bond, and creates a more positive and supportive work environment.
Okay, I can see that. So what about recognizing common dignity? That sounds a bit, well, philosophical for a Monday morning meeting. How do we make that a tangible practice?
It is a deeper concept, but incredibly powerful. It's about remembering that everyone, regardless of their background, their job title, or their perceived success, deserves respect and has inherent worth. Imagine a workplace where the CEO and the intern are both treated with that same level of respect, where everyone's contribution is valued.
That does sound pretty refreshing, especially in today's world where so much of the modern workplace feels like a constant battle for status and recognition. But how does peaceful conflict resolution fit into this whole unconditional love framework?
Yeah.
Because disagreements are bound to happen, right?
Of course. And Martinez doesn't advocate for avoiding conflict or pretending everything's always rosy. It's about having those tough conversations with honesty and respect, seeking to understand the other person's perspective, and looking for solutions that benefit everyone involved.
So finding that win-win even when it's hard.
Exactly. It's about understanding that conflict, when handled well, can actually be an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding, both individually and as a team.
All right, I'm on board with the theory so far. But are there any real-world companies actually putting this into practice? Or is this all just a nice idea that sounds good on paper? Because, the cynic in me wants to see some proof that this love and action approach actually works.
And that's what's so fascinating about this book. Martinez doesn't just leave us with theory. She actually highlights companies who are leading the way with this approach and seeing incredible results.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. Tell me more.
Well, take Patagonia, for example. They've completely revolutionized the fashion industry by prioritizing sustainability and ethical practices, showing that doing good can also be good for business.
Yeah, I've heard great things about Patagonia. They really seem to walk the walk when it comes to their values. So they're proving that profits and purpose can coexist. That's pretty inspiring.
Exactly. And what's really powerful is that Martinez includes real stories from employees within these companies. Like, she tells the story of a Patagonia employee who is able to balance their passion for environmental activism with their work, giving their job even deeper meaning and purpose.
Wow, those personal stories really bring it to life, don't they? It suddenly feels less like some unattainable utopia and more like something we can actually strive for. What other companies are on this love train, so to speak?
Well, she also features Satya Nadella's leadership at Microsoft. When he took over as CEO, he made a conscious effort to shift the company culture from one of cutthroat competition to one that values empathy, collaboration, and a growth mindset. And the results: increased employee satisfaction, a surge in innovation, and even a boost in their market valuation.
So it's not just niche companies. We're talking about industry giants proving that this approach can work. That's pretty impressive. What other examples really stood out to you?
Unilever's commitment to incorporating the UN Sustainable Development Goals into their business model is another great example. They're really pushing the boundaries of what it means to be a responsible and ethical corporation, and they're seeing great success doing it.
It sounds like they're completely redefining what it means to be a successful company. It's not just about profits anymore. It's about making a positive impact on the world.
You got it. And they're demonstrating that profitability and ethical behavior can go hand in hand. It's not an either proposition. You can do good and do well at the same time.
Okay, I'm seriously inspired right now. This is giving me so much to think about, both in terms of my own leadership style and the kind of company I want to be a part of. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's maybe shift gears a bit and talk specifically about how this whole unconditional love idea impacts leadership.
Mm.
Because that seems to be at the heart of Martinez's argument, right? That this is the key to becoming a truly transformational leader.
Exactly, and that's where things get really interesting. She argues that unconditional love is the core of truly transformational leadership. It's about shifting from a place of command and control to one of service and empowerment.
It makes you wonder, what would the world look like if more leaders embraced this approach? It would completely challenge the traditional power structures we're so used to, wouldn't it?
It definitely would. Instead of leading with ego and authority, these love-driven leaders, as she calls them, focus on humility, authenticity, and a genuine desire to serve others. It's a pretty radical departure from the my way or the highway leadership style we often see.
I love that. But are there specific qualities that these love-driven leaders embody? Or is it just a general vibe of being a good human? Because that can be a bit hard to define, you know?
Well, Martinez does outline several key qualities. Humility is a big one, as well as having a clear vision, being authentic and relatable, and being truly willing to serve others, to put their needs before your own ego. She also talks about this fascinating concept of balancing feminine and masculine energies in leadership.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me. Is she talking about gender roles here?
Not exactly. It's more about embracing the full spectrum of human qualities. So feminine energies are things like intuition, empathy, collaboration, nurturing, while masculine energies are things like assertiveness, decisive action, structure, and focus.
Ah, okay. So it's about finding that sweet spot, that balance between the two.
Precisely. She argues that truly transformational leaders embrace both sets of energies, leading with both strength and compassion. They're not afraid to be both tough and tender, so to speak.
Do you have any examples of leaders who really embody this balanced approach? Because honestly, it sounds a bit like a mythical unicorn at this point.
Well, think about Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. She led her country through some incredibly challenging times, like the Christchurch terrorist attacks, with this incredible blend of empathy and strength. She balanced decisive action with genuine compassion, and it really resonated with people.
Yeah, that's a great example. I remember seeing her speak after those attacks, and her compassion was palpable, but she also projected this quiet strength that was so inspiring.
Exactly. Another example that comes to mind is Satya Nadella, who we discussed earlier. He's definitely driven and focused, but he's also made a conscious effort to foster a more empathetic and inclusive culture at Microsoft. He's really walking the talk when it comes to balancing those different energies.
Wow, hearing these examples is really making me rethink my own leadership style and the qualities I want to cultivate. But we've covered so much ground already. Maybe we should take a breath and come back to this in our next session. What do you think?
I agree. It's a lot to process. Let's give everyone some time to digest all this goodness and pick back up in part 2.
Sounds like a plan. All right, listeners, we'll be back soon to dive deeper into putting all of this into practice. Stay tuned.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We've covered a lot of ground already, from self-love to building a unified team, all through this lens of unconditional love. I mean, it's a pretty radical approach, wouldn't you say?
It definitely is. I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical at first.
Right.
But the more we've talked about it, the more I'm seeing how powerful it could be. It's like we're redefining what it even means to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Like maybe it's not just about climbing the corporate ladder and chasing profits.
You're right on the money there. That's a huge part of what Monica Martinez challenges us to rethink in this book. She argues that true success is about so much more than just those external markers of achievement. It's about our well-being, our impact on others, and whether we're contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
Okay, so less about winning at all costs and more about creating something sustainable and meaningful both for ourselves and the world around us. But how do we actually measure that kind of success? It's not as simple as looking at a spreadsheet, right?
Right, it's definitely more nuanced than that. Martinez actually provides a framework for this new definition of success built on 3 pillars: comprehensive well-being, sustainable impact, and a culture of shared growth.
I'm loving these 3-pillar frameworks. So helpful for wrapping my brain around all this. Let's start with comprehensive well-being. What does that even look like in the workplace?
Well, it's definitely not just about free snacks and ping pong tables, although those are nice perks, don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah, perks are always appreciated. But it sounds like you're talking about something deeper.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that people are not robots. We have physical, emotional, and mental needs that need to be addressed if we're going to truly thrive, both personally and professionally. Imagine a workplace where employee well-being was prioritized just as much as productivity.
It's like that saying, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Hmm.
So are we talking about things like flexible work arrangements, mental health resources, and a culture that actually encourages work-life balance?
Absolutely. It's about creating a workplace that supports employees' overall well-being, not just their output. And there's a growing body of research showing that when people feel cared for and supported, they're actually more engaged, more creative, and ultimately more productive.
So it's a win-win for both the employee and the employer. Okay, I'm on board with that. Now, what about this idea of sustainable impact? That feels like a big one, encompassing a lot of different things.
It does. But the core idea is that our success shouldn't come at the expense of others or the planet. It's about making choices that are both profitable and ethical, considering the long-term consequences of our actions.
So thinking beyond just the next quarter's profits and considering the ripple effects our decisions will have for years to come.
Exactly. It's about incorporating things like environmental sustainability, fair labor practices, and giving back to the community, recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions have consequences that extend far beyond ourselves.
It's about realizing we're all in this together, not just competing for a bigger slice of the pie.
Right.
Okay, and the third pillar is a culture of shared growth. What does that actually look like in a work setting? Is this where all the trust falls and team building exercises come in?
Haha. Well, those can have their place, but a culture of shared growth goes deeper than that. It's about ditching the cutthroat, competitive mindset and replacing it with a more collaborative and supportive environment. Imagine a workplace where everyone has the opportunity to learn and grow, where people celebrate each other's successes and offer support through challenges.
That sounds pretty amazing. So it's about shifting from an every person for themselves mentality to a we're all in this together
Yeah,
approach, right?
exactly. And what's interesting is that Martinez backs this up with research showing that organizations with a more collaborative culture tend to be more innovative and resilient in the face of change.
That makes sense. When people feel safe to share ideas and support each other, you're more likely to get those creative breakthroughs. Okay, all of this sounds great in theory, but I'm curious, are there any companies out there actually living and breathing this new definition of success?
Absolutely. We already mentioned Patagonia, right? They're a fantastic example of a company that's prioritizing sustainable impact. They're constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible, even when it means sacrificing short-term profits for long-term gain.
Right, like that "Don't Buy This Jacket" campaign.
Yeah.
That was a bold move.
It was, but it really solidified their commitment to sustainability and resonated with a lot of people.
It definitely got people talking. So what other companies are out there setting a good example?
Salesforce is a great example when it comes to comprehensive well-being. They really prioritize employee wellness, offering a ton of benefits and programs to support their employees' physical, mental, and emotional health.
I've heard they even have mindfulness rooms in their offices.
Yeah.
It's like they're acknowledging that people have lives outside of work and that those lives are important too.
Exactly. And they've found that investing in their employees' well-being actually leads to increased engagement and productivity. It's proof that taking care of your people isn't just the right thing to do, it's also good for business.
Okay, what about companies that are really exemplifying that culture of shared growth?
Google comes to mind. They're known for their incredibly collaborative and innovative work environment. They invest heavily in employee development and training and encourage risk-taking and experimentation. Failure isn't seen as a setback, it's seen as a learning opportunity.
It's like they've created a space where people feel safe to be creative and push boundaries without the fear of being punished for making a mistake.
Exactly. And that kind of freedom is so essential for fostering innovation and growth. When people feel supported and empowered, they're more likely to take risks and come up with those game-changing ideas.
Hearing all these examples is honestly so inspiring. It feels like there's a real shift happening, a movement towards a more humane and purpose-driven way of working and leading.
I agree. And I think books like Monica Martinez are playing a crucial role in this shift. They're giving us the language and framework to articulate this new vision and start putting it into practice.
It's like she's handing us a toolbox and saying, here you go, let's go build something amazing.
That's a great way to put it. But it's not enough to just read the book and hope for the best. We have to take action both individually and collectively to make this vision a reality.
So it's about having those tough conversations, challenging the status quo, making choices that align with our values, even when it's hard.
You got it. It's about being the change we want to see in the world and remembering that it's a journey, not a destination.
We're not aiming for perfection. We're aiming for progress.
Exactly. And it's a journey we can take together. One of the things that really stood out to me in Martinez's book is the importance of sharing our stories, both the challenges and the successes we experience as we try to integrate these principles into our lives and work.
I love that. Sharing our stories normalizes these conversations and inspires others to take action. It's like we're creating a ripple effect of positive change.
Exactly, and that's why Martinez encourages readers to connect with each other on her online platform. It's a space where people can share their experiences, access resources, and support each other on this journey.
Building a global community dedicated to making work a more human and fulfilling experience. That's a powerful vision.
It really is. So before we wrap up this part of our conversation, I'm curious, what's really resonating with you from all of this? What's sticking with you?
Honestly, it's that emphasis on redefining success. It's so easy to get caught up in the pursuit of external validation, measuring our worth by our job titles and achievements. But Martinez reminds us, the true success is about living a life that's aligned with our values, making a positive impact, and cultivating deep and meaningful connections with others.
Beautifully said. And for me, it's that reminder that we have a choice. We can choose to operate from a place of fear and scarcity, or we can choose to operate from a place of love and abundance. And that choice ultimately shapes the kind of legacy we leave behind.
I love that. It's about choosing love over fear, even in the workplace. And that's a powerful message to carry with us as we move into the final part of our deep dive.
Absolutely. All right, listeners, we'll be back in part 3 to explore how we can actually put all of this into practice in our own lives and organizations. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've explored all this inspiring stuff about bringing unconditional love into the workplace, but now for the million-dollar question.
Yeah, the rubber hits the road, right?
Exactly. How do we actually make it happen? We can talk about theory all day long, but I think our listeners are ready for some practical advice. How do we take all this inspiration and turn it into action?
I hear you. And luckily, Monica Martinez doesn't just leave us hanging. I mean, she actually dedicates a big chunk of the book to giving us practical tools and strategies. It's not just about feeling good, it's about doing good.
Okay, so where do we even begin? Is there like a step-by-step guide to becoming a love-driven leader? Should we be buying bulk crystals and essential oils? Kidding. But seriously, where do we start?
Well, before we go handing out sage and rose quartz, let's remember the basics.
Right, back to the fundamentals.
It all starts with those foundational practices that cultivate self-love and self-awareness. You know, the whole you can't pour from an empty cup thing.
So true. But what does that look like in practice? I mean, are we talking about just trying to be more mindful? Or are there specific exercises Martinez recommends?
Both, really. Mindfulness is definitely key. But Martinez really emphasizes daily reflection. It's about taking a few minutes each day just to check in with yourself, you know? How are you feeling? What are you needing? What are your motivations? It's about tuning into your inner landscape so you can start making more conscious choices throughout your day.
That's interesting. It's like hitting the pause button on autopilot and becoming more aware of our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, all that stuff that's usually running in the background.
Exactly. And along with that self-awareness piece, she talks a lot about connecting with your purpose. What are you passionate about? What impact do you want to make on the world? When you have that clarity, when you're really connected to your why, it becomes a guiding force in your life and work.
It's like having a compass to navigate all the chaos and decision fatigue. But how do we actually discover our purpose? I mean, it's not always obvious, is it?
It can take some digging.
Yeah.
She suggests exploring your values, your passions, the things that truly bring you a sense of fulfillment. And sometimes, you know, your purpose evolves over time. It's a process of discovery, not a one-time aha moment.
Okay, that makes sense. So once we've done some of that inner work, connected with our purpose, all that good stuff, how do we start bringing this unconditional love into our interactions with others, especially in the workplace where things can get a little, well, complicated?
Well, one of the most powerful tools, and we've touched on this before, is active listening. Really, truly listening to someone without interrupting, without judging. It creates such a sense of safety and connection. It says, I see you, I hear you, and I value your perspective.
It's about making that other person feel like they genuinely matter, even if you don't agree with everything they say, right?
Right. And it's often the small things that make the biggest difference. Making eye contact, nodding your head, asking clarifying questions. It's about being present and engaged, not just waiting for your turn to talk.
Totally. I can see how that would build trust and rapport. Now, what about recognizing common dignity? We talked about that at part 2, but how do we make that a tangible practice in our day-to-day interactions? It still feels a little abstract to me.
I get it. It's a deeper concept, but it boils down to remembering that every person, regardless of their background, their beliefs, their job title, has inherent worth. It's about treating everyone with that same level of respect, whether it's the CEO or the intern.
That's a powerful shift in thinking. I mean, we're so conditioned to judge people based on their status, their achievements, all those external markers of success. But I'm curious, how do we navigate conflict when it arises? Because even in a super lovey-dovey workplace, people are going to disagree sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Martinez doesn't pretend otherwise. She actually has a whole section on peaceful conflict resolution, and it's all about approaching disagreements with that same spirit of understanding and respect.
Okay, so how do we do that? What's the secret sauce?
Well, she emphasizes the importance of staying calm, of really seeking to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, and then focusing on finding solutions that benefit everyone involved. It's not about winning the argument. It's about finding a resolution that works for everyone.
So it's about finding that win-win, even when it's hard.
Exactly. It's about seeing conflict as an opportunity for growth and deeper understanding, both individually and as a team.
All right, I like that. So far, we've been talking about personal practices, individual interactions. But what about leaders specifically? What can they do to create a more loving and supportive work environment?
Well, one of the most powerful things leaders can do is lead by example. It's the whole actions speak louder than words thing. If you want your team to embrace these principles, you need to embody them in your own behavior.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Got it.
Exactly. And it's also about creating a culture of transparency and open communication, making sure your team feels safe to share their ideas, their concerns, their struggles, encourage feedback, create opportunities for dialogue. Make it clear that it's okay to not be okay all the time.
It's about building that psychological safety, right? That sense that people can be themselves, that they won't be judged or punished for speaking up.
Exactly. And along with that, celebrate successes collectively. When someone on the team achieves something great, acknowledge their contribution, make sure everyone feels a sense of shared ownership in that success.
Fostering that sense of teamwork and camaraderie, I like it.
And finally, don't be afraid to show your own vulnerability. Admit when you make mistakes, ask for help when you need it, let your team see that you're human too.
It's about taking off that mask of perfection we all wear sometimes and allowing ourselves to be authentic and relatable. I bet it's pretty liberating to lead from that place, huh?
It is, and it allows others to do the same. When leaders model vulnerability, it creates a ripple effect of trust and authenticity throughout the whole organization.
This has all been super inspiring, but I gotta be honest, I'm also feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, okay, this all sounds amazing, but where do I even begin? It feels like a lot to take in.
I hear you. It can feel that way. But remember, it's a journey, not a destination. You don't have to do everything at once. Start with one small thing. Maybe it's committing to that daily reflection practice or making a conscious effort to really listen to someone without interrupting, or simply offering a word of encouragement to a colleague who's having a tough day.
It's those small acts of kindness, right? That can really create a ripple effect.
Exactly. And you don't have to do it alone. Martinez offers a ton of resources on her website, including guided meditations, journaling prompts, and even a community forum where you can connect with other people who are on this path.
Oh, that's awesome. Like a built-in support system.
It is. And the more we share our stories, the more we support each other, the more we normalize these practices, the more this becomes, not just a nice idea, but the way we do things.
It's about building a movement, right?
Yeah.
A collective shift toward a more loving and conscious way of working and being.
Exactly. This has been such a great conversation, and I'm honestly feeling a renewed sense of hope and possibility, like a real shift is happening, a movement towards a more human-centered way of working and leading.
I feel it too. And I think Martinez's book is playing a really crucial role in all of this. It's giving us a language and a framework to actually talk about this stuff, to make it real in our lives and in our workplaces.
It's not just some fluffy feel-good theory, it's a practical guide for creating a better future. A future where, love truly does lead the way.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Monica Martinez's Unconditional Love and That's It, what's the one message you want our listeners to take away?
Unconditional love isn't just for our personal relationships. It has the power to transform our workplaces, our communities, the world, really. And it starts with each of us making a conscious choice to operate from a place of love, not fear.
That's beautifully said. And I hope our listeners feel empowered to make that choice, to step into their own leadership, and to start creating those ripples of love in their own spheres of influence.
Me too. Because even the smallest act of kindness can make a difference.
So true. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Unconditional Love, and That's It by Monica Martinez. It's been an incredible journey.
It really has.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep choosing love.